I, Mahesh Jethmalani, having been nominated a member of the Council of States, do swear in the name of God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of India as by law established, that I will uphold the sovereignty and integrity of India, and that I will faithfully discharge the duty upon which I am about to enter.
Namaskar, hello and welcome viewers. You're watching this special presentation of Sunset TV, your MP with your host Kriti Mishra. And joining us today is a very special guest, Member of the Upper House of Parliament, Mr. Mahesh Jethmalani. Sir, welcome to Sunset TV and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Sir, pleasure having you. But let's begin talking about your political life. How did the political innings begin? Now, you were nominated to the Upper House of Parliament by President of India. Tell me, how did that happen? Recount that day for us.
Oh, I had a call from the Prime Minister. I think it was in May 2021, and he asked me to come and see him. I came and saw him a few days later, and met him at Lok Kalyan, 7 Lok Kalyan, and we had sat me down, and then he told me that he was taking me to Rajya Sabha. So I was enthralled, and I couldn't conceal my joy, and I was very grateful to him, thanked him. We had a little conversation, chat on some political issues, discussed China as far as the Indo-China relations, and took a photograph, told me to not mention it till the notification was released, for reasons I can't disclose, and I promised him I'd do that. And I kept it completely to myself. Didn't tell anybody till the Home Minister rang me up about 3 weeks later and told me, you can now officially say that you have been nominated to the Rajya Sabha because I have released the notification.
So fantastic. That was the beginning, sir. But you've been a legal doyen, sir. Tell me, how did you always think of politics as one of the avenues in your life?
Yes, I always had it in the back of my mind, and see, I grew up during the time of the emergency, and my father was a victim of the emergency. There was a warrant out for his arrest because of a speech he had given against Mrs. Gandhi and the declaration of.
So take us through that chapter of your life.
So this was when I was about 15, 16 years, no, a little later. I think it's 1975. So when I was about 18, 19 years old. My father was very outspoken. When Mrs. Gandhi first announced the declaration of emergency, he made a number of speeches all over the country. Finally, a district magistrate in Kerala issued a warrant for him, a place called Palghat in Kerala, where he had attacked Mrs. Gandhi quite ferociously for the declaration of the emergency and the subversion of human rights, and linked it up with that electoral verdict that came against her by Justice Sinha of the Allahabad High Court. So this warrant came out for his arrest, and there are about 300 lawyers, and the top doyens of the legal profession, just Palkhiwala, Fali Nariman. So 300 lawyers filed a petition in his favor, and all the top lawyers came and argued for him in the Bombay High Court, and the Bombay High Court stayed the warrant of arrest. Then the entire batch of these, at that time, MISA, the maintenance of everybody was arrested under that act. So the entire batch of petitions under which detainees, mainly the entire opposition, was in jail. So all those cases went to the Supreme Court. And I was there in the Supreme Court when the case was argued, just before my father had to leave the country, because the full bench of the Supreme Court, Constitutional bench of the Supreme Court, the argument made at that time was a shocking argument. The Attorney General said that during an emergency, if you want to shoot a detainee, you can shoot a detainee. And, my father then made a very passionate argument by which the last line, memorable line which I'll never forget, where he said was, democracy lies in a coffin, don't shut the lid. So, notwithstanding all the powerful arguments made by an array of lawyers, including him, the Supreme Court passed that judgment, ADM Jabalpur, infamous judgment. where it upheld all the contentions of the state to the extent that they could have all these draconian powers when they declared an emergency. He came back to Bombay and, he was a criminal lawyer, so everybody knew him. He had friends in the Congress, etc. Everybody advised him. They'd advised him before to keep calm and not say anything, right? But he wouldn't listen. A police commissioner came from the then law minister and said, Ram, we have to execute this warrant now. This Supreme Court judgment has come, right? Please leave the country. We don't want to arrest you. So he left the country. The police commissioner personally escorted him out, took him to the airport, made sure he got into a plane. And my sister was a doctor in the US. So he went to the US in Michigan and stayed there and was in exile for all of 2 years till Mrs. Gandhi declared the election in 1977. And then, at that time, I became close to the underground that fought against the emergency in Mumbai. I used to be close to what we call the Indian Express group, which was really a powerful, under Ramnath Goenka. He put the whole newspaper. And a very close friend of my father's. And in his absence, I used to meet Guru Murthy. So I've known Guru Murthy since I was 17 years old. And we used to fight the emergency in clandestine ways. The emergency, the Indian Express used to write whatever it could. There was censorship. Right? We started, to some extent, there was an underground newspaper movement. One day, Jayaprakash Narayan, who was leading that whole movement, he used to come to Ramnathji often in Express Stars in Mumbai. And I used to be sitting there as a young man, and watching all these things. And one day, he was kept in house arrest because of his health in a place called Cuff Parade in Bombay. And Ramnathji wanted to send a letter to him. Right? So he used to call me Badmash.
Acha.
Okay. He said, will you do something brave? I said, yes, whatever you say, I'm all up for it. He said, रामनाथ जी के पास एक चिट्ठी पहुंचाना है गुप्त रूप से आप ले जाएंगे I said हाँ खुशी से ले जाऊंगा so he written a letter right there was a lot of police and all outside you had to get through the whole thing and they'd frisk you and check you etc so I tucked it inside my pants trousers and they frisked me they thought I was a young person I went up there and Jayaprakash Narayan was sitting there ill health he had I think he had started getting that kidney issue handed him over the letter on this first floor apartment, right? And of course I'd met him by then, so he knew me by name. And then he said, "I'm penning something. Take it back in the same way that you did." So I had to go to the toilet again, put in my trousers, and then. So, in short, I was, I'd already started because of the impact of emergency. My family, my father being in exile for 2 years, And all our old friends wouldn't come and see us. So, all the people at the bar, my father's friends, people were so scared at that time. Except those who fought clandestinely the emergency and went to jail, some of them openly. It was a pretty horrific period if you were one of the family members of somebody who opposed the emergency. So I had that in my blood. And then, then from there on, when the election started, I came back. In between, I went to England to study. I went in 1976 to England, went to America to meet my father. By that time, he had become a professor in university in Michigan. And then I started my studies in England. When Mrs. Gandhi declared the election, I came back in 1977, March, temporarily. Campaigned in northwest Bombay. We won that election against the then law minister, a gentleman called Gokhale, who had actually promulgated the emergency. So it was a sense of great satisfaction from northwest Bombay, Bandra, Juhu, that area. Won that area. So I had got my taste of electoral politics, everything since then. My father also stood earlier in 71, but I was about 14 at that time. So, it was very early days. So, and I had gone, but I wasn't that actively involved. Here I was actually involved in the campaign and so on and so forth. And then next 2 elections he stood, the Janta government collapsed, but he again stood from the Janta Party, that Savai. He won that election in 1980. I was his election agent then. And in 84, when he lost to Sunil Dutt, in the wake of Mrs. Gandhi's death, I was again his election agent. So I've had a long, early start in politics. In between, the Bharatiya Janata Party was formed. When they split on the dual membership issue, the Bharatiya
Yes.
Janata Party was formed. And the first convention was held in Samta Nagar in Mumbai. And I had a lot to do with the organization of that in terms of funds and all. So I used to raise funds to few people who would give it. In those days, there was not much that came the BJP's way, but whatever we could, we used to house, in those days, Vijay Malhotra and Madan Lal Khurana, all the stalwarts of the BJP. They used to actually come and stay at my father's house where I used to stay in Mumbai.
So, as a journalist, this line really intrigues me that those who were friends never came to see us during that period.
Yeah, it was.
I want to understand how difficult was that period as a young boy whose father was in exile?
You felt like an outcast. I was never scared, right? Because, I had that family tradition. My father was a very outspoken and brave man, didn't care about anything. Didn't care about his personal safety, nothing. So he was a great inspiration. I wasn't scared, but sometimes I felt isolated. But there were a lot of, the Indian Express group that coalesced around Guru Murthy, Ramnathji and Arun Shuri, right? That became a real sort of safe haven for me and a source of comfort. We used to meet there, discuss. I used to feel part of a battle which looked very difficult but slowly seemed to be improving. And ultimately, against all odds, the people gave a massive mandate. So it was an emotional time because my father used to miss India a lot and I used to see his pain. He did want to come back. For him, India was his home and it was almost like a second, exodus for him. First he had built his home in United India in Karachi. So it perturbed him a lot. And then miraculously 77 happened, we won and we were all back. And then I became, the Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha vice president. So I've been with the BJP, my father in between, he's been very volatile. So he's gone here, he's gone there, he's become MP from different parties, Rajya Sabha, 2 times Lok Sabha. But I have been in all that pretty, stable. My allegiance has always been to the Bharatiya Janata Party.
So, what draws you so passionately towards this ideology?
I think initially anti-Congressism. I think, when I was young, my earliest recollections are everybody used to love Chacha Nehru, right? 62 war, people reassessed that whole thing when we lost to China, right? People became very disillusioned and this, we found that we were going too far left and embracing Maoists, and that cost us, and the Maoists were not to be trusted. There was this whole Hindi, Chini, Bhai Bhai slogan in those days, lekin piche se khanjar maar rahe the. They were usurping our territory, took over Tibet and so on and so on. So in hindsight, the disillusionment started and the alternative was only an alternative ideology. This whole, leftist, socialist kind of movement, a heavy emphasis on, non-alignment and, and non-alignment really became pro-communist regimes. So that disillusionment and the natural, first it was the Grand Alliance. I remember the Grand Alliance consisted of the then Congress O organization, which was the breakaway from Mrs. Gandhi. And there was a Swatantra Party of Pilu Modi. Yes. There was, of course, the Jan Sangh. The Shiv Sena in Maharashtra was part of that Grand Alliance. And some like-minded parties, So when the other parties started dissipating, the only party which really had a base by that time was the Jan Sangh, which then became the BJP.
That's right. And then moving on from that era to your legal life. Take us through those interesting facets.
So my legal life was actually, it started very political. The first time I came back after my law studies in England, I was tossed by my father into the prosecution of the then Chief Minister Antule.
Tossed?
Yeah. He said, you've got to take up this case, prepare the complaint. So that was my baptism of fire. I had to prepare the entire case, which we did. And then we filed, it was a big corruption scandal where cement, which was controlled, the commodity cement, which was controlled by the state, and the chief minister kept that to himself. The allotment of cement, which was a scarce commodity, that cement was allotted against money. And the chief minister, then Mr. Antole, who by the way was the law minister when my father was sent into exile,
Okay.
and had told him, you better leave.
Okay.
So he was also, to be fair to him, a friend of my father. But this corruption scandal became too big, and it kind of, defined the Congress party through the 70s, and then later on 80s when Bofors came and all that. But this corruption scandal was the first big scandal. So we prosecuted him, and it was a mammoth case. It used to hit the headlines. It went to the trial court, it went to the special court. It came to the Supreme Court many times. So I joined the profession in February 1981 after coming back. The first 3-4 years, in fact, up to 1988, Antole was a huge overhang. And all the way from the trial court, so you cross-examine. Then the matter was transferred to the High Court by the Supreme Court, because they said he's a chief minister and he has to prove his innocence. He's under a cloud. So 7 years of my life went basically in, but I learned a lot, because I learned trial court practice, I learned evidence, I learned procedure, I learned crossing. Then I had the great privilege, which many people don't have. For a long time, for almost a year, I was cross-examining witnesses
Okay.
in the High Court under the foremost judges. So, and my witnesses were people like all the big builders of Bombay who had given money. I had to establish that they took 40 rupees per cement bag.
Okay.
From,
Okay.
They had to pay into these trusts which he had set up. So it was like daylight bribery. He had set up trusts in which he would take money, 40 rupees per cement bag. It was almost a calculation.
Yeah.
So it was massive. A lot of the builders came in. I had to cross-examine Jamshed Bhava of the Tatas, because NCPA was involved in some donations. Ajit Kerkar, from the late Ajit Kerkar. Many others. I mean, there were the galaxy of people who, bureaucrats who had allotted the cement pursuant to his orders, and so on and so on. So it was political from the start. The next thing that happened was the next big event that happened. I mean, I'm almost defined through the kind of phases I went through. Was the Sikh riots of '84, and again I was in Delhi at that time. I came there. My sister and my father led processions to protect Sikh homes. He did a lot for the Sikh community in those days.
Okay.
And he defended Longowal, all the Sikh moderates. For him, the Sikh community was the sword arm of India, and he really wanted to. He felt that Bhindranwale was a Congress creation.
Okay.
And he really felt that Mrs. Gandhi had. And then when Operation Blue Star happened, the next step was the assassination of Mrs. Gandhi. He didn't take it for the actual assassins, Satwant and Beant Singh, but he took it for the so-called conspirators. So I used to come to the Supreme Court and again sit in those cases. Again, it was political. It was, that whole Sikh riot business. In fact, then there was a General Vaidya assassination case, and there was a bureaucrat from Delhi called Gurnial Singh. Can't remember which ministry he used to work for. His younger brother, Yadavinder Singh, was accused of being part of the plot to kill General Vaidya. And he was completely innocent. That Gurnial used to come and say, beg me to take the case.
Okay.
So that was the next case I took. That I had to personally handle. Right? His name was Yadvinder Singh. And his co-accused were, it was what is his name? I forgot his name. He was a very famous Sikh terrorist. They used to be the co-accused in the case. And that case was held in the precincts of the Yerwada jail in Pune. The trial was actually held there. So I used to go to Pune, live there, and go to to conduct the trial over there. And I got Yadvinder Singh acquitted. There was practically no evidence against him. A very brave trial court judge to do that when you had the whole system gunning for you. But he got him acquitted. He was a completely innocent man.
And then?
Then came my marriage
Okay.
in between. So, I started now thinking of a family. My daughter was born 3 years after my marriage. And I took a back seat completely in politics. I just stopped getting into, I decided to start changing.
Why?
Yeah,
Why?
yeah. My father was there, and it was very difficult, and for a lot of reasons, that fell on me. He used to be extremely contentious and controversial. So, and I couldn't agree with that always. I couldn't always agree with what he was doing. So, he would be in some cases for the BJP, but he left. He was not in. Then he'd leave the party. Then he got a seat from R.K. Hegde, who was close to the BJP, right? From Karnataka. In 1988, he became a Rajya Sabha member from there. So he had a really, here and there kind of political career. So it became very difficult, and I didn't want to. Then I said, it's time that I spend some time with the family. I've started politics too early.
That's true.
And I want to now make a, proper living. But a lot of these political cases, Antule was incredibly free. I mean, going all the way to the Supreme Court also. My father used to pay for the tickets and all that. So, and I was not earning any money in those cases.
So that was your legal life, and the fact that your parliamentary life. How do you perform this juggling act? Now.
Well, I think it's lovely that you can be in that luxurious space where you can multitask. I mean, law is a very jealous mistress, as they say, if you're a married man.
That's true.
It is a very jealous, and a lot of hard work. But there's nothing, to be a legislator and a lawyer, to argue in court, and then to see it from the inside. Here, being on the Law and Justice Committee, we get so many bills, and we get all the stakeholders of those bills. There's so much, the most constructive work for me, and I don't like to miss my parliamentary committee meeting. Well, I feel that the most productive, of course, it's lovely to debate, make a speech in Parliament, support some bill, right? As a ruling party member, you always have to support bills, right?
Yeah.
So you can't analyze them too critically, right? You have to even support some of the things you believe may not quite be right, right? Though in the committees you can in the committees you can say that this doesn't sound good or this doesn't sound good, but so it can't be. Everything is adrenaline flowing. Whether it's in court now, the cases I'm doing in court are back to being. I mean, it was only for a short while. Even when I got back into really serious non-political private practice in Bombay, there were always political cases.
Right.
There was, I did L.K. Advani's election petition in Gwalior in the early 2000s. There was a Gwalior petition for his Rajya Sabha election. Brief 10 years where I was doing a lot of very lucrative practice, right, in Bombay. Then again, I got into lucrative practice plus a lot of pro bono work, which was mainly, or at least borderline political.
Borderline political. But before I wrap up this conversation, and a very interesting one, I must say, going ahead, what are your priorities as a parliamentarian?
I just want to be the optimal parliamentarian. I mean, I want to do whatever it takes to be a good parliamentarian. I try to keep my attendance must be 95, 96%, right? I try and attend as many committee meetings as possible. The only times I miss them is because of equally important court work, some of which are again for the party. Right? I mull over bills very in great detail. I make suggestions during committee meetings. Right? I read extensively. I know my rule book of Parliament pretty well. So from here onwards, I don't know what, for me, actually, I fulfilled, my one dream was to be in Parliament.
Yeah.
I think no further. I want no more. So I am quite happy ending my tenure in Parliament. And, I'm not looking for any, executive assignment or anything like that. I'm very happy where I am. I love my practice. I love being a lawyer. It's my first love. So combining these two is the way I'd like it to play out. I'm very happy.
Fantastic. And the fact that you're happy makes all of us happy. And thank you so much for this very, very interesting conversation
Not at all. It's a
and taking
pleasure.
us through your legal, political and parliamentary life.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Well, viewers, that's all we had for you in this edition. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Sunset TV. Goodbye for now from my side.